Hello, my name is Mac Cammack. I currently farm some of my family's land in Owen, Kentucky. The name of the farm is Bainbridge Place. Currently farm a little under 400 acres. The family farm has been in the family since 1790, before Kentucky was even a state, given to us by a land grant from Virginia. We had a grade A dairy up until 2000. I moved onto the farm in around 2006, and I've been increasing my participation in the farm since moving up here. When I moved here, I had a public job, so my time was somewhat limited on what I could do in terms of farming. I have been a hay and cattle producer for around 8 years, but I was also raised on a small family farm in Harrison County where we had beef cattle, and I raised 11 crops of tobacco to pay for my way through college at the University of Kentucky. 2019 was our last year for raising tobacco on the farm here in Owen County. And since then, I've put the ground into alfalfa production, and I've also done some conversion of tobacco barns to make them more utilitarian for hay and equipment storage. I'm currently a part-time engineering consultant, which has greatly added to my flexibility and enables me to branch out and try many different things with the farm. Our family farm and family has always been very conservation oriented. That, and along with it being in the family for such a long time, we have areas of virgin forests. We have built a wetland. We have one farm that I'm not farming, but near this one that is warm season native grasses. And then, as you can see here on our farm, where I am, we also have multiple ponds for ecological and recreational purposes. I have taken production of forages pretty seriously. I am small scale, but I have won multiple quality awards. So I do think some of the things that I'm doing do seem to work. So a little bit about the evolution of my forage and farming operation in general. Even though I am on close to 400 acres, I did start small and with old equipment until I had a market established. This was particularly for small square bales and alfalfa hay. And as I've kind of already alluded to, because my family is ecologically minded and conservation oriented, stewardship of the land is one of the highest priorities to me. This has led me to minimal chemical usage. And along with that, I'm a big believer in using soil tests to minimize fertilizer inputs. One, they're expensive, and two, you don't want to waste it and just send it into the watershed. And hand in hand with the hay operation, basically with the rotation of alfalfa fields in and out of service, I have begun using regenerative ag to help build soil health by the use of diverse cover crops. I am an engineer and have a scientific background, so I'm a big believer in the use of technology and published research to help a person along the way. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel when somebody else has already done it. I do tend to like things that have been tested in a scientific method and are repeatable. I don't take everything with a grain of salt. I like to try things. I'm not scared of failing. So if there's something that I don't think it works just because people say that it will, I will try it and don't mind to fail. And along with that, my scientific background, big on doing forage testing. I think this is a good indicator of, well, obviously the quality of the hay, and it can also be very helpful for marketing purposes, because you're actually able to directly show a customer that what they are purchasing is quality hay and is backed up by science. And along with the testing, I've also begun to do moisture testing to see if preservative is needed to fight the humid climate that we have here in Kentucky. That kind of came about from having some cuttings of alfalfa actually ruined in the barn. And and you all know that that's not a cheap mistake to make, nor something that any of us want to do. So I started out with old equipment. Started with small equipment. Got a lot of my dad's old equipment from his small farming operation. The stuff had been sitting in the barn and basically retired. You can see the old farmhand, five-wheel farmhand brake that I started out with. Old hay mine in the background behind that. The old 1965 square baler there. So as I have said, I started out small because I did not know the market and how easy it would be to sell squares. So it made no sense to make a $150,000 investment and not be sure about it, because it was just kind of dipping my feet into something new. My operation started and still is small. So I've been very thankful to have some great help from friends and family. Here's a picture of us starting out with the old New Holland 272. That's how I started. It's one of the first years. And where I am small, I actually still, there's some dad and uncle, we load hay by hand. So we do it the old-fashioned way. Now let's move on a little bit to my operation practices. I have upgraded along the way, mainly focusing on productivity and reliability of the equipment. Hay to me is one of those things that you have a very small weather window to work in, so that when you have to get into the field, you have to be productive and cover as much ground as you possibly can. Whether this be mowing it and trying to get the hay down, or much so trying to catch that little weather window where there's a proper amount of case in the alfalfa to where you're not knocking leaves off of it when you're tedding it. So that's always kind of been the focus. Obviously, you can see here a bigger tractor, bigger equipment. Went from a hay bind to a mower conditioner. Actually kept the hay bind also as a backup and a companion to use with the disc mower conditioner that I have. And that also has morphed into a higher capacity baler to your old 1960s balers. Just you're not going to get very much production out of it. And like I said, you have a small window. You have to cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time. So productivity is one of the most important things. And upgrades have also happened along the way when you have a disaster. Like, for example, here's one of the first barns that I started out with. You can see where I had some small amount of hay stored in here. This was taken out by a tornado. But sometimes things work out. Got this nice free span hay barn with concrete floor. So whenever the opportunity arose to upgrade, I have jumped on it. I've used my engineering background and my strengths to help me become better as a forage farmer. I think my attention to detail has helped me to improve my processes. I just briefly spoke earlier that we're ecologically minded, so I don't like to use chemicals. I use a minimum use of chemicals in my operation. But they're not my go-to, but I also know that sometimes that's the only way to fight weeds and such. A good example would be I use a weed wick to attempt to combat Johnson grass, which is just invading my area. Um, my operation practices, along with the ecology thing, I'm in hill country. So anything that causes erosion is not good. So I'm very, very conscious on that in my practices. This also goes on to the beef side of things, including rotational grazing, proper pasture loading to reduce animal impacts. Um, and I am not scared to try new things or to continue to upgrade and evolve. I like to try new things. Along with this, I like to test different techniques and timing. For example, use of a tedder. I have lots of local friends that say don't use a tedder, and I do agree that it knocks leaves off. But through attempting to not use a tedder and to use a tedder, in my opinion, I'm just unable to get the consistency and quality, especially in small square bales, that my customers expect. So that's one thing that I've done many trials on to see if I could get by without tedding. And like I said, I just unable to produce the quality of hay that I would like to. So it brings me on to my next point that I have shifted, showed you a slide earlier of the mower conditioner next to my old hay bine that I got from my dad. And I have become a big believer in using a mower conditioner in everything, not just in the small squares that I sell to the horse industry, but the cattle hay that I put up for my own cows, and then the roll bales that I also market to sell. I've just found with the climate that we have in Kentucky and the humidity, it seems like it stays wetter longer in the spring, and we just have such tight weather windows to work in. You're running a mower conditioner allows you to knock that extra day off or so, and has enabled me to get hay in more quickly, and I'll actually be practically done before most people are a good portion of the way through with their crop. And hay conditioning also, with being able to start on your grass hays and stuff earlier, greatly increases the forage value, because the digestibility of the forage just decreases as you allow to go through maturity. And along with the mower conditioner, you can see here I still have the old hay bine. But like I said, everything I run through conditioner, it just really helps you get that moisture down, the initial moisture down that you need, drop it to below 40% so that you can cease respiration and keep the quality high, color high, and good smell. All things that are important when you're trying to market high quality hay to the horse industry. This is also kind of morphed further into the use of preservative application on my square bales. Had some brutal summers here in Kentucky lately. This summer was rough also due to the humidity. Use of preservative, propionic acid is an expensive input, but when you have the difference between getting a cutting of hay in or not, or having it spoil on a wagon, which I did have happen to me this year, the cost can be somewhat justified. It is an extra headache, though, of testing the moisture, getting your application rates correct. And my applicator is not automated, so you have to remember to turn the thing off and on at the end of your windrows. So the next thing I would like to talk to a little bit about is just equipment maintenance and selection. I've already alluded to the fact that I started out with some old equipment. Here's a picture here of a square baler made in the 60s. Used it for several years, ran thousands and thousands of bales through this thing. Got it making a pretty good bale. I did have a few bearing failures with it. This is, I think, one winter that I actually pulled the plunger out of it and replaced every single bearing in the entire machine. I'm big on doing these things in the winter because there's nothing worse than when there's a big black cloud heading over the hill and you're trying to get hay in, that you're laying in the poison ivy or laying up underneath your equipment working on it instead of getting hay in. Biggest issue that to me I've run into with older equipment is not necessarily that you can't do it with it. Problem that I found is productivity. This old square baler, you just couldn't get much more than 100, 150 bales an hour out of it. And when you have a lot of hay on the ground, that can be a big bottleneck. But maintenance is important. I pull in every piece of equipment that I have every winter and go through it thoroughly. Anything that it needs, it's better to do it then than it is, especially for those of us. I mean, yes, I'm part-time now with my public job, but those who try to farm on the evenings and weekends, you need your equipment to be running and not be working on it when it's time to get the hay in. The other thing I would say, here's an example of going through the old hay mine off season. Another thing that I think that is important about equipment is that it needs to be sized correctly. For instance, this hay bine is a 9-foot cut. So to me, it's very important to have a tedder that will equally handle 2 swaths of this. And also for a hay rake, you don't want a tedder that will only take a swath and a half or 3 swaths of what your mower can take, because you end up being inefficient in the process. So some things I've learned, I've already touched base on these. To me, one of the biggest things I've learned is that you need to condition your hay to produce high quality forage, especially for small square bales. The horse industry people are very particular about the hay quality, color, everything, shape of bale even. It's amazing the marketing difference of being able to produce a perfectly shaped bale out of my newer square baler compared to my old one. Again, I touched base on that the hay conditioning allows for earlier cutting and thus increased forage values. And I've already touched base. I was just kind of go back over some of the things that my opinions on equipment. So future plans for my operation. I'm at a weird size. I'm at the upper limit of what I can put in hay by hand. So I'm ready for an accumulator upgrade. That was one of the reasons that I went from the older square baler to the newer one, was not only for productivity, but to have the bale shape needed, bale consistency and density needed to feed it into a mechanical handling system such as an accumulator. I've also looked into doing haylage. Those of us from Kentucky know very difficult to get that first cutting of alfalfa in. It ends up being very late before you can get it in a dry hay situation. It ends up potentially pushing future cuttings of your really high quality square bale type hay later, which affects profitability. But it's another big investment, and I don't like plastic. That goes back to the ecological side of things. And then also the round baler that I have, it takes a certain type of baler with a silage package to be able to handle wet forage. You also potentially run into an issue with your V-rake. I use a wheeled V-rake. They don't handle a heavy crop as well. And also, if you're running a large tractor, you have some issues with compaction, tracking the fields up, getting in there early. But it's definitely some large tonnage of good feed that I'm missing out on with my current operation of not being able to either do it by haylage or some type of silage or some other process to where I can get it in earlier. I have since taking over our tobacco crop fields, we've had issue with the topsoil being washed into the hollers. So as part of my good stewardship of the land, I have begun Uh, Dabbling in regenerative agriculture through the use of diverse cover crops to attempt to build soil organic matter, water infiltration rates, and etc. Um, as part of planting these different cover crops, I can also do some species of annuals that can actually be produced into forage. And then I'm also looking into integrating rotational grazing into some of these areas. Um, Not necessarily on the forage side, but I've also begun to finish some beef on the farm. Also going to be in the process of putting a hops trellis up now and getting some bees. The bees kind of go along with the regenerative ag portion. I can put some good pollinator species in with my diverse covers and make the cover crops even more beneficial for than just the soil, just the overall ecology and diversity of the ecosystem on the farm. Um, but that was just a little bit about my operation, and glad to have your ear for a moment. And if anyone has any questions, I'm here to answer them. Thank you.